Welcome to this day with Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Mary Tyberski, and I'm an outgoing member on the board here at QUUF, finishing up our church year at the end of this month. It was really a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to serve. As we gather, I acknowledge that the water, land, and shorelines here in Port Townsend are the traditional territory of the S'Klallam and Chimacum peoples. We honor and acknowledge our indigenous members and neighbors and vow to help restore and sustain these homelands. If you're visiting today, I offer a special welcome and invite you to join us for refreshments and conversation in the fellowship hall after the service. We have a newcomers table near the patio doors where our greeters are ready to answer any questions you might have. So welcome to you all this morning. We're glad you're here. Now for an announcement. The Green Sanctuary Environmental Action Team is delighted to welcome singer-songwriter, environmentalist activist Dana Lyons for an outdoor concert in the garden at QUUF on Sunday, July 14th at 4 p.m. Check the weekly update for more details. Now let us settle our minds and calm our hearts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Pratt, your worship assistant today. And as we head into the summer, we look forward to a number of guest speakers. You may have seen this speaker around the congregation lately, but you might know who he is, not know who he is, so I'm going to introduce him. Reverend Michael Walker is a UU minister. After 11 years of interim ministers all over the country, he is now on hiatus from active ministry while he completes a PhD in clinical psychology. He is currently at something called the ABD stage. If you know, does anybody know what that is? His dissertation seeks to identify psychological predispositions for cult involvement. He continues to serve in a volunteer capacity in the UU Ministers Association as a program planner for continuing education and collegial gatherings of ministers, and also in the Ministerial Formation Network as a mentor for new colleagues in ministry. He now resides with family in Sequim.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I thought it was important that we introduce me for anybody who is visiting. And if you saw Reverend Walker on the order of service, I want you to know that, like you, I'm a guest. My colleague, Linda Hart, is the minister here, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be with you today while she is on vacation. So for our opening words, I'm going to share with you some of the writings of my colleague, the Reverend Tom Owen Toll. And he wrote, "Many are the windows that will stay darkened unless we light them. It is our watch now. Come, great hearts, come dancers and dreamers, singers and poets. Come builders, come healers, come activists. Come those of the soil and those who command the might of machines. Carry the sacred flame to make light the windows of the world. It is we who must be keepers of the flame. It is we who must carry the imperishable fire. It is our watch now. It is our watch now." Thank you. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing Answering the Call of Love. If you need the music, it is number 1014 in the Teal hymnal. Go ahead.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when hope will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
We pause for a time of generosity and to receive an offering to support the life and ministry of QUUF. The ushers will now come among you to receive the offering, and additional ways of giving will be projected. Please join me in our offering words. This fellowship is the community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. Thank you, Al and Helen. Okay, this time is set aside to share our joys and sorrows. We recognize that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the joys and sorrows of the larger community of life. And thus, we place this first stone, thinking in particular of the global political climate and anxiety that many individuals are feeling about the future of our country. Yeah. No kidding. And now, within the congregation, we light a candle of joy for the Chichmahan Chetsamoka Trail and all the volunteers who have worked so hard on it. Yesterday was the 5th year anniversary of the trail, a joint project of the Jamestown Sklallam Tribe and QUUF's Native Connections Action Group. Hooray for you. And involved generous support from our congregation and the tribe. The trail provides a visual narrative of Indigenous history in Port Townsend. And we place a candle of joy for the birth of Ennio Vincent Avila, born on Friday, June 21st, to the R.E. family, Christina and Jonathan Avila. Congratulations, Avila family. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Avila or Avila. Now we place a stone in honor of the journey of 8 of our middle and high school youth who are headed off today to our UU Camp Blue Boat in Idaho today. They will spend a week in community with other regional UU youth. Now a final stone, holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows I've just shared, but also thinking of such joys and sorrows among us that are unexpressed but of no less importance.
As we hold these joys and sorrows in our hearts, I invite you into a few moments of meditation. Spirit of life, reveal to us and all who companion our days and share the works of our hands, we pause to give our thanks. We are grateful for communities of conscience which inspire us to step outside ourselves and make real those values and beliefs which move us to action. We give thanks for the truth tellers in our lives, prophets and poets whose passion for justice stir in us a renewed hope of a world made fair and all her people one, turning us now into one more prophet. Let us take just a moment of silence. Blessed be. Thank you for that beautiful music. I would like to begin today by quoting the opening line of somebody else's sermon. The words I share come from an influential figure in Unitarian history and in my own theological development, Ralph Waldo Emerson. His Divinity School address has become required reading for all UU ministers and scholars, and at the beginning of summer, this seems appropriate. And he wrote, "In this refulgent summer, it has been a luxury to draw the breath of life. The grass grows, the buds burst, the meadow is spotted with fire and gold in the tint of flowers. The air is full of birds and sweet with the breath of pine, the balm of Gilead, and the new hay. Night brings no gloom to the heart with its welcome shade. Through the transparent darkness, the stars pour their almost spiritual rays. Man under them seems a young child, and his huge globe a toy. The cool night bathes the world as with a river and prepares his eyes again for the crimson dawn. The mystery of nature was never displayed more happily." Emerson led the Transcendentalist movement that deeply affected early American Unitarianism, for which he'd been a minister. The movement is based on the philosophical concept that our knowledge of reality transcends that which we can perceive with our 5 regular senses: touch and taste, sight, sound, and smell. Emerson went on in the sermon to discuss his issue with Christianity. Recall that this was the early stage of Unitarianism, which had not yet shed any sort of Christian veneer. And he wanted to comment about what he heard around him in religious communities. And he spoke about what he perceived to be the noxious exaggeration of the person of Jesus. He said the soul knows no persons. He discussed that it was important that we not subordinate nature or our personal natures to the person of a God, or all that is so, because all that is so much more than any person, no matter how divine one believes them to be. I think the Transcendentalist movement could just as easily have been called immanentism, because they taught that something holy is to be found within us and within all that is. That is, it is immanent within each of us and also in the world itself. And I think by kind of ridiculously calling the globe a toy, Emerson reminds us that the globe is not our toy and that we are responsible for the world. Corporate interests hiding behind disingenuous ideologies be damned. We UUs have, in this era, restated the Transcendentalist position in our 7th UU principle, and I know we just recently reworded all this in our denomination, but I think most longtime UUs will recall these words, acknowledging that we are part of an interdependent web of all existence. If this congregation is like many, there are likely to be many humanists and non-theists here, so it might be a bit risky to say that I believe in something greater than myself, something holy, something divine. In my belief, as in with most UUs, I strive to intentionally leave room also for your belief, whatever that may be. I start with this, a statement of creed, one that is open and accepting of other views, so that we may then set aside creeds and focus on deeds instead. Throughout Unitarian history, we have acknowledged something greater than ourselves and yet did not stop there and say, believing this is all that I need to do. No, ours is a faith in which action is as important as belief. Another religion may say that one need only subscribe to the Nicene Creed or recite the Torah daily or fully submit oneself to Allah in order to be saved. In our faith, we generally believe that we must act to save the world and ourselves. and that action is on par with belief. To help us bridge from belief to action, let's consider the work of another early Unitarian thinker and minister, William Ellery Channing. He was one who advised us to focus on our deeds rather than our creeds as the focus of the work we do for ourselves and for the world around us. He got to that point theologically by introducing the concept of salvation by character. Again, I ask us to recall that this was an era in which Unitarianism was still closely aligned with Christianity, and salvation was still a common topic of theological discourse in our churches. Channing differed from Emerson in that he was still in relationship with God, while Emerson was in relationship with nature. Some might think they're the same thing, although Channing and Emerson understood them to be different. I'd like to share some words from Channing about God, not because I believe them necessarily or that you will believe them necessarily, but because this is a historical step along the evolutionary road of Unitarian Universalism. Our movement did not arise one day fully formed in the manner that we see it today. Rather, it evolved over time with many steps or stages along the way. In the sermon in which Channing first named us Unitarian, when he coined that word, he said, "We conceive that Christians have generally leaned towards a very injurious view of the Supreme Being. They have too often felt as if he were raised by his greatness and sovereignty above the principles of morality, above those eternal laws of equity and rectitude to which all other beings are subjected. We believe," he said, "that in no being is the sense of right so strong, so omnipotent as in God. We believe that this almighty power is entirely submitted to his perceptions of rectitude, and this is the ground of our piety. It is not because he is our creator merely, but because he created us for good and holy purposes that we pay him allegiance." There ends the quote. By the word rectitude, Channing was lifting up what Buddhists often call right action. In Channing's usage, the meaning is that by our deeds we shall be known, remembered, and saved. The propensity, the burgeoning possibility for good deeds is embedded in our individual characters, he would say. By teaching salvation by character, Channing showed that it's not just what we say we believe, but more importantly, how we truly think, feel, and act, especially act, that leads to our own salvation and, by extension, our ability to save the surrounding world. At this point, longtime UUs may be asking yourselves, do we need to be saved? From what or whom do we need to be saved? Isn't the concept of salvation an old chestnut that really doesn't serve us well anymore? It's a fair question. To help answer that, let me ask some questions of my own. I'm going to get particular to our world that we live in. If oil companies are destroying habitats to extract oil from shale, or endangering water supplies by fracking, or losing containment within offshore oil rigs, will the earth save itself? If someone you love engages in some sort of self-destructive behavior, such as addiction or alcoholism, will God save your loved one from his or herself? If the national health care system is overrun by corporate interests and appears to be broken, will the government save you in your time of medical need? If our African American neighbors die in custody for minor infractions or for no infraction at all of the law, who is going to save them? There are many more questions I could ask, but my point is that we do need to be saved, sometimes on a daily basis, and it is through the efforts of everyday people that we are or are not saved. To me, it seems to be as simple as that. Through our own efforts, by our deeds, we are saved. A colleague of Emerson and Channing, who served in ministry a generation later, was Theodore Parker. Here was a man that by his deeds many people were indeed saved. He was also a transcendentalist and was a bit notorious in his time because he questioned the doctrine of the inerrancy of the Bible. His work came to symbolize another step in the evolution of Unitarianism when he taught us about transience and permanence in the matters of life and spirit. He identified the transitoriness of doctrines and questioned the provenance of the Bible. That is, he suggested, and this was just so controversial then, he suggested the Bible was written by men and not by God. He pointed out that people in history had died for questioning whether the Bible was really written by the hand of God. After pointing out the transience of doctrine, he then lifted up the permanence of values that he felt should guide the human race. He said it was by reason, conscience, and faith, things highest in man's nature, that we see no redundancy, we feel no deficiency, he said. He went on to teach that we may keep the law of God by living a life of truth and love, rather than by blindly adhering to doctrines as the only basis for one's way of being in the world. This was a brave questioning of doctrine, but he's perhaps most remembered for the deeds he committed rather than the words he wrote. You see, in addition to his daily work as a Unitarian minister, Parker was also an abolitionist, working to end slavery, and whose home was a stop on the Underground Railroad. He risked his life to help others, and in some small part, contributed to the salvation of a race. It should be noted that I said a small part, and that I previously said that it's mostly by one's own self that one is saved, though another may contribute to the effort. I remind us of that because Parker did what he did, and his deeds were just and at great personal risk. However, we must not forget those who escaped the shackles of slavery and risked their own lives to travel the Underground Railroad. Truly, by their own deeds, they were saved. But let's continue this theme. Speaking of deeds in the form of work to counter racism. First, we noted Parker's work during the Civil War, and now let's consider a more contemporary colleague, the Reverend James Reeb, who was working with Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement to proclaim equal civil rights for all people, regardless of race. James Reeb and his family, all white, had intentionally lived in neighborhoods identified as black, first in Washington, D.C., and then in Roxbury, part of Boston. He began as a Presbyterian minister, but was drawn to the social justice ethic of Unitarian Universalism, and so he converted. He would become known for how he turned his ethic of justice into deeds. In addition to serving in the UU congregation, Reeb was also a member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and he supported the work of Dr. King. These personal decisions led to events that people at the time had no idea would change our country forever. After a day known as Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, Dr. King called on all who supported equality to march from Selma to Montgomery. James Reeb came down to march with him, but he was in Selma less than a day when he and two other UU ministers were attacked on the street. Reeb died of his injuries 2 days later. At his funeral, Dr. King gave the eulogy in which he called Reverend Reeb a witness to the truth. These events directly led to President Johnson pressuring Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act, the first landmark legislation for civil rights. Reeb's deeds did indeed become a saving grace for others, although many have noted that far too many black people died in that era, receiving no media attention or public outcry, as did the death of James Reeb. Perhaps that's another lesson for us, a cautionary tale, to take blessings where we find them even if it is not fair. Maybe the work for fairness will come later and be every bit as important. I also recognize the possibility that I'm wrong on this, in light of all the work happening now in the Black Lives Matter movement, which I support, and yet despair over the fact that such a movement is still needed. Before I move on, there was something else that Dr. King wrote that I think is still pertinent to us today. He was invited to give the Ware Lecture at the UUA's General Assembly in 1966. And he said this to all UUs: don't sleep through the revolution. Not one to sit complacently, as witnessed by his word and deed, Dr. King lived for justice and freedom, and he called on us to do the same. We hope and pray that no one else is ever martyred like Reeb and King in response to their good deeds. We are called to shake off our complacency, to exhibit good character, and do the good works that need to be done, whatever they may be in this time and place. I'd like to conclude the words with a contemporary UU minister that is walking his talk. My colleague from San Diego, Tom Owen Toll, often speaks of justice and considers whether optimism or hopefulness may be part of our work for justice. And he wrote, "Justice building means being not optimistic, but hopeful. Optimism indicates that matters will work themselves out eventually among the races, classes, genders, and orientations, so we can just sit down and coast a bit. Hope says, no, we must keep the pressure on, we must remain attentive, we must dialogue and dance, meditate and march, we must repent and resist, we must risk more passion and quit trying to be so damn logical about injustice. In sum," he concluded, "we are called to resist and reconcile all the way home." Indeed, like many before him, Owen Toll brings us back to considering our deeds, what we do to make the world a better place. Once in a while, I encourage you to ask yourself, what do you do to make the world better? It is by our deeds, not our creed, that we are saved. It is by our work for justice that others are saved, as well as ourselves. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. Our closing hymn is The Fire of Commitment. It's 1028 in the Teal hymnal, and you're invited to rise in body or in spirit.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of flame that burns within. Then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin.
It is by our deeds that we are known, remembered, and saved, said Reverend Channing. We are each called to actively work for good in our lives and in our surrounding community. And Dr. King said, the plant of freedom is only a bud and not yet a flower. We are called to water that bud, to help it flower, spreading freedom and justice throughout the land. Let us go out and do that good work together. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. You're invited to join us in our chalice extinguishing words, which are on the screen. Yes. We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be.